Before we get into episode 94, we got to talk a little bit about Patreon. Patreon is a great website to go to help out artists such as ourselves. We are at patreon.com/chew on this podcast, where you can sponsor us for as little as $1 a month. There's various tiers and various rewards depending on what you donate. And you could be part of the Chew Crew for as little as $1 a month. So that's patreon.com, that's patreon.com/chew on this podcast.
You know, this year is coming really fast. Like, it's almost over.
Yeah.
Like, Star Wars will be, what's going to happen is the first 11 and a half months blew by like nothing. And then the last 2 weeks or week before Star Wars comes, it's going to be slow as hell.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So, but the reason why I bring up the year's almost over is we've been advertising or trying to get Wawa to pay attention to us for 8 months now, 7 months now.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah, and once again, the hashtag is West Coast Wawa. This is how much I love Wawa, right? So I got cold brew from Starbucks today, and it sucked. It sucked. It was better.
I don't like going there.
It was better when I had fresh ground beans from a Wawa that a friend brought over from New Jersey, and I cold brewed it myself. And the beans were so much better. And I've actually cold brewed Starbucks coffee too, and the Wawa coffee is 100 times better. And I'm not even doing it because I want Wawa out here, even though I do. I'm honestly telling you, the beans from Wawa, the coffee is way better than Starbucks. I'm sure like the first Starbucks was good, but the Starbucks I went to was probably like 3,049. Like, and it wasn't good.
We love Wawa so much that we're rejecting Starbucks money right now. We're getting all these sponsorship from Starbucks. It's like, please mention us, and we're like, no, we want Wawa. No,
yeah,
just kidding.
We wish. But even then, we would have a leg to stand on to actually say like, hey, Wawa, we've been like loving you guys for showing you love for like 7 months. Starbucks is coming to us, and we're like, no, fuck you guys. The cold brew from Wawa is way better.
Or just take the Starbucks money and buy more Wawa.
Or take the Starbucks money and open a Wawa.
That'd be the ultimate fuck you.
Yeah. So what I'm telling everybody now on the West Coast, if you don't believe me, you can actually go to Wawa's website and actually order their coffee, and they'll ship it to you. You can't get the sandwiches because that's just dumb, but you can definitely get the coffee. So
well,
just
you
go
see
get the
how
coffee.
So you see how that kind of goes hand in hand. You support us on Patreon. We get enough backers, we'll open up our own Wawa.
That's a lot of Patreon subscribers.
But you never know.
Yeah, wishful thinking. Like the fact that there's like $700 million in lottery tickets out there right now.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
I tell you what. If we won that, or one of us won that, we would definitely open up a Wawa. It doesn't matter.
I'd have a recording studio. I mean, I actually have a pretty decent recording studio right now, in the room that nobody uses in the house. But you don't. I think you sit in the kitchen.
No, I'm so literally at the dining room table right now. Yeah. Staring into the dark. That would be a good use.
So the other thing that we need to mention before we get into this episode is we're going to be at San Francisco Comic-Con. Don't ask us how. It just happens. It just happens. I don't know how this shit keeps happening, but somehow we're going to be like podcasting from the Oscars one day. Anyway, and doing our Chewy Awards from there instead.
Right. So forget the Razzies. The Chewies are here. We're going to be. I don't have the room number on me, but I'll mention that at some point as we get closer. But it's going to be September. Well, I think San Francisco Comic-Con goes from September 1st through the 3rd.
Right.
We're going to be podcasting on September 2nd, which is the Saturday, in the evening. It's like 10 o'clock. I know that sounds late, but I'm telling you what, if you've ever been to any of these cons, whether it's a small one or a large one like San Diego, these things go all day and sometimes way into the night. And people are just fans, huge fans, crazy fans. Nobody knows who we are, but we're hoping after this... after what we have in store for our audience, we hope that they'll get to know us. So
I'm not going to say
it's be exciting.
We don't really know what's going to happen. I know what I'm going to be doing there, but all I'm saying is bring munchies.
Yeah, for us.
Yes. And there can be sharing. There can't be sharing during the podcast, but we can share other things for us to get hungry. So if you are going to show up, don't, You don't even have to come for the podcast. Just hang out for 45 minutes listening, or an hour listening to your iPhone or something. But just come hang out with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for all of you guys out there that are on the West or East Coast or overseas or whoever is listening to us, you can listen to that podcast the following Monday.
Nobody's listening to us overseas. The only way somebody's listening to us overseas, it's one of our 4 viewers, and they go on vacation to like Europe.
Right. And even then, they're not really listening to us. Like,
Yeah.
maybe. Well, anyway, so before we get into the pod, this is really cool how this came about.
Yeah.
We literally had no idea what we were going to do this week, and at the last minute, this thing happened.
So basically, what happened was
What was that thing? 'Cause
I read this article.
You were part of that.
I read this article, and it was about He-Man's 30th anniversary, and it was about the it was about the movie. He-Man the toy was 30th anniversary. Wait, He-Man the movie, I think, right?
Yeah, the toys came out in '82, so it's like 35 years or
Jesus
something
Christ.
since that came out. Yeah.
So anyway, so I read this article. Had no idea there was a documentary out there about who is responsible for creating He-Man. I loved He-Man growing up. That was my first real toy figure action line that I loved. Even though I had Star Wars, I was too young to understand Star Wars, but I still had it. But He-Man was my first major love.
Yeah.
And then right after immediately He-Man died out, it was Transformers. But He-Man was my first major love. I didn't know this. I didn't even know this existed. I didn't know this was an issue. So I tried to watch the documentary, check Netflix, check Amazon, nothing. Hulu. I was like, fuck you guys. It better not be on Hulu because I don't have Hulu. And it wasn't online. And then I found them on Facebook. Come to find out that the movie hasn't been released in 5 years now since it was finished.
Yeah, they finished it back in
So
2011 or 2012.
So I had
like that.
no idea what was going on, and so I was like, you know what? I love this shit. Me and you have said it like so many times that we love the behind the scenes stuff on all of the Blu-rays. That's the first thing I go to before I even watch the movie when I did buy Blu-rays. So this stuff is like right up my alley. It's like King of Kong. I loved it. The Conan, the Canon documentary.
Canon Films. That's awesome.
I love all this stuff, right? So I internet stalked him, found the guy on Twitter or the movie on Twitter, the handle, and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna tweet him like every other person that fucking ignores us. I'm still waiting for The Rock. I'm still waiting for like Emma Watson. I'm still waiting for Christopher Nolan.
Keep waiting.
Mark Hamill. So I'm still waiting for all these people. Michael Bay. He would be the last person to ever respond to us. But if he did, he definitely didn't listen to our podcast. But
no, that would be awesome.
Oh, that would be great.
It would be like Steve Carell, interviewing Toby. Like, who do you think you are?
So,
From The Office.
Unlike everybody else, the director actually messaged me back.
Yeah.
So this took place all in 3 days. So his name is Corey Landis, and I should have asked him if he was related to John Landis, but I didn't do that. But
that'd be so cool.
it would have been funny that I didn't ask him that question, and he is related to John Landis.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so he got back to us, and all of this went down in 2 days. And he actually sent us a link for the movie, and I got to tell you, we don't pull punches. If you've listened to this podcast, we will tell you if it sucks. This is awesome. If you grew up in the same time frame that we did, you're gonna love it. If you love documentaries, you're gonna love it. If you love great stories, you're gonna love it. There's actual characters in this documentary that you're gonna love and hate at the same time.
You can't make up. Yeah, you can't make these people up.
It's awesome, and it to me, because I played King Kong. I mean, I played Donkey Kong when I was a kid, but I didn't love Donkey Kong. I loved He-Man, and I'm telling you right now, I like this documentary way more than I did King of Kong.
Yeah, I kind of did too.
Like if they made one for Transformers, it would probably be like
put it over the top.
Yeah, just because Transformers, I think I loved more than He-Man, but He-Man was my first real love of action figures.
It's a riveting story, and I mean, I think he went there to do one thing and came out of there with something much bigger, and he said there was hundreds, like just hours and hours of footage, and they whittled it down to something very compelling.
Yeah, this is how good the documentary is. We did research on the movie because we thought the documentary was a big portion of the movie. It's not. It's maybe like 10 minutes long. The documentary is so good that we actually watched Transformers the night before. He-Man Masters of the Universe the night before the movie. We watched that one to get ready for the podcast. I didn't want to talk about the movie anymore after I watched the documentary.
I didn't either.
All I wanted to talk about was the toys. But here's the other catch too. This is a spoiler-free podcast.
Yes. Yes, because the movie has not been shown yet. Very few people have seen it, so I felt very privileged to be able to watch it.
So there's no spoilers in here, but maybe we can get Corey back once it gets released, and then we can spoil the shit out of it because there's things in this that I wanted to say, but I couldn't.
I know. We wanted to talk so badly about it, but I think we did a pretty good job of like getting a lot out of him and the origin of this and why he did it and what he got out of it, and This is a really fun podcast. So
yeah, he actually had stories
he
actually had stories about making the film that he couldn't tell us until the film was actually released.
Right.
So he's got more stories for us. So we're hoping he doesn't hate us after this podcast and actually comes back on.
No, he's a pretty cool guy. But yeah, we hope you guys enjoy this podcast, and then I really, really hope that he said the movie's the closest it's ever been to being released. I hope that happens because people need to watch it. It's really, really good. I hope Netflix picks it up because it's that good. It really needs to be up there with the rest.
Maybe it can fill the void of all the Disney shit leaving.
Yeah, and Corey, if you're listening to this, put once the movie does get released, put thanks to Chew on this podcast in there.
Yeah, that's what he's going to do.
He's like, no.
Yeah, that's what he's going to do.
All right. Well, strap in, folks. Enjoy Corey Landis and the maker of the documentary called Toy Masters.
Yep.
So, it's called Toys Masters, and it's about like the origin of the He-Man character. Riveting stuff. All right. Well, enjoy. Welcome to a very special episode of Chew on This and Nerds United podcast. I'm BJ.
Vic.
So we have documentary filmmaker Corey Landis, who went on this unbelievable journey to figure out where He-Man originated from, the actual action figure, which is absolutely riveting to me too. I remember those toy lines very well back in the day. Of course, I was a Star Wars guy, but He-Man always kind of fascinated me when I was a kid. I loved that action figure line, and my friends all had them, and I didn't. So it was kind of one of those things. But anyway, but this documentary, Corey, is pretty fascinating. And how did you guys like kind of come up with this idea? What kind of sparked that?
Well, let's go back to. So, Corey, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to any of our podcasts, but anytime we get anybody on, we basically internet stalk the shit out of you. So, like, we look up your name. By the way, you can curse on this podcast too.
Yeah, all you want.
All right. I internet stalked you, and I came to find out that you played Young Red on that '70s show, which I remember that episode.
I remember that too.
Because it was so freaking cool how spot on you were. Because he's got like a very distinct delivery, and like I love that guy. I was always scared of that guy because I remember watching RoboCop as a kid.
Oh yeah.
So it really when he was that '70s show father, I was like, oh God, it's that guy from RoboCop who's a real asshole. And,
I
so
remember
different.
I remember him from Dead Poets Society.
As the father,
being that scary dad, and so I was not only terrified just to meet him in general. I was terrified to have to do some half-ass impersonation of him too. So, but I had nothing to worry about because he honestly is the nicest guy on the face of the earth. He's just so tremendously nice.
Did he? Was he able to talk to you after he saw your performance, your imitation of him?
Yeah, I mean, he sort of saw it in the moment during rehearsals, and I just kind of sheepishly was like, "Dude, I'm so sorry that I'm doing this," and he was just like, "What are you talking about? This is great," So he's super super sweet. So he was a really great guy to hang out with. Yeah.
Did you watch?
Did he ever call you a dumbass?
He may have done it only in good fun.
Did you watch a lot of footage from that '70s show to get it right, or did you watch a bunch of other stuff like RoboCop?
Well, it was in a weird time when there wasn't a lot of stuff immediately available. When I went in for the callback, they gave me, and this should tell you, whereabouts we were in technology. They gave me a video cassette tape to look at, and it was called like The Best of Red, and it was just a series of clips of him. And so I took this this cassette tape home, and that's what I sort of looked at, and that was kind of it, because it was really the early days of the internet, and I had never seen the show before, and I knew who he was from RoboCop and Dead Poets Society, and I just kind of went on that plus the video cassette tape they gave me.
Well, I remember I was shocked when I saw this. I was like, "Oh my God, it's the same guy!"
Yeah,
Because I remember that episode vividly, thinking this guy nailed him perfectly because he's so dry.
Well, thanks. I mean, it's just some people can sort of mimic or imitate, and I didn't have a whole lot to do, so I was very glad that I was able to get the part.
So then, fast forward 10 years later, and you decide to make a documentary.
Nothing happened in between. That was it.
And you decide to do this documentary about a toy that you loved.
Yeah, basically. I became friends with my co-director, Roger Lay, when he cast me in a film that he was producing, which was a Ray Bradbury adaptation, and we became good friends. Found out that he was a big sci-fi, comic book nerd guy himself,
Nice.
and so we just shared a lot of interest and stories, and we both had a lot of time on our hands, and so we were writing scripts together, and in the course of writing scripts together, we just shared all of these stories and past experiences of things that we liked, comedy and all sorts of stuff. And He-Man came up, obviously, Masters came up, and he asked me if I had ever read a certain book about it, about the history of it, and I said no. And he said, "Well, you gotta borrow it and you gotta read it." And so he loaned me Roger Sweet's book, Mastering the Universe, and I took it home, and I read the thing, and I just thought it was fascinating, and so much of it was unknown to me, and I considered myself to be a pretty big, a fan from childhood, and I just said to Roger Lay, I said, we're writing all these scripts, and who knows if these things are gonna ever get done, and Roger had some experience doing a little bit of behind-the-scene footage on Everybody Loves Raymond, and he shot a documentary about Forey Ackerman, and he had all the equipment left over from the feature film that I met him on, and I just said, "Look, we got the equipment, we only need a camera and a microphone. This is a fascinating story, and somebody's going to do this at some point. Why don't we just... We'd be kind of fools if we didn't sort of try to do something with this."
That's awesome.
And he was the one, though, that because I come up with bullshit ideas all the time, and
Right.
I'm not going to pursue them. It's very easy to go, you know what we should do, but Roger, to his credit, was the one that started just compiling a list of all of the people we should get in contact with, and then finding a way to get in contact with them, and that's how it started. It was just kind of like every weekend we would go, Roger would say, "Hey, I contacted so-and-so this week, and they're available for an interview. Why don't we go see them?" And there's so many people that were in the LA area. We just started doing it that way. We had no idea what was going to come of it. It was just easy enough to do because we had the time, the people, and the equipment. And so we just started collecting footage. We just started interviewing people, and we just started going down the list and ticking them off. And we wanted to get as many people from all the different eras and aspects of the Masters line that we could. And then we got to a certain point, and we kind of felt like, we kind of hit everything, and we talked to a bunch of people, and Roger went off, and he took, I can't remember how many hours of footage we had. I want to say it was something like 50 or something like that, and he cut it down to 4 hours, and he sort of just put it in, a timeline sort of order, and just sort of chopped off all the stuff that we knew that we wouldn't need or want in it, and it was just sort of a series of 4 hours of talking heads, and and then from that point, I think what happened next was we needed sort of an incentive to get moving on it and try to turn it into something, and so I think Robert Burnett maybe got us entered into the Fantasia Film Festival, which is a big, influential, sort of fantasy and science fiction festival in Montreal. So we got it entered in that, and now it became, well, we've got a drop dead date in order to get this thing cut down to something reasonable. So and then I think at that point, I'm trying to remember, I think I took it off with a friend of mine who had Final Cut and just started whittling it down with his help, and then just kind of added some temp music and so forth. And we had something like a little bit over an hour and a half, somewhere between an hour and a half and hour 45 minutes version that we showed at Fantasia.
It's pretty tight. It's pretty tight.
Yeah, at this point, it's been reinvestigated, re-edited a couple times, but the main sort of storyline and thread was sort of put into place at that point, and everything since then has basically just been trimming the fat, adding the bells and whistles on production value. And
was the cartoon or the crayon drawings part of the original cut?
No, that was added. That's definitely part of the bells and whistles we added after the fact. That was done, I would say, fairly recently, just as a device where we knew we needed some sort of visual accompaniment to some of the voiceovers, and we were trying to figure out what would be best. And we just thought, well, when we were kids, we used to sit in classrooms and draw Star Wars and Masters and all this sort of stuff. So it'd be kind of cool if we had it looks like an 11-year-old did these drawings of the things that we were talking about. So that's kind of how that came about. And then Mike Nichols, who ended up being one of the producers on it and one of the editors, and he ended up animating that stuff. So that's how that turned out.
Was it an actual 11-year-old who did the drawings, or one of you guys faked it?
I was going to draw them because I can draw, but I had a friend who I'd seen his sort of amateur comic strip work before, and I knew that it was the perfect look for it. He's an adult. He's a couple years younger than me, but I thought, like, I could do this, but it wouldn't look quite like this. And I knew he had the absolute perfect touch, that just the way of making it look very sort of deceptively simple and naive, and he did exactly what. Yeah.
You could tell what those drawings. You could tell who each person was very distinctly. So
exactly.
I like that.
No, he did a great job. I mean, he obviously copied all of the distinct outfits from the interviews, and then I hand colored each one of those in colored pencil myself. So I at least did that.
It looks great. It gave a really good feel of like being a kid because you're watching this as an adult, but the crayon drawings brought me back to being a kid. Also, also the commercials, like all the commercials that you showed in the documentary. Just so our listeners know, it's not. We're not going to go into spoiler territory in this one, so it's going to be a spoiler-free interview. But these things don't take away from the actual content of the documentary, because so basically how this came about this came about really quickly, a lot,
The last couple
really
days.
faster than probably our fastest interview ever. And I basically just read an article, saw your 11-minute clip that you released to promote the film, and I searched you guys out on Twitter, and I was thinking, I love this thing, but I can't find it anywhere. And then I saw your Facebook page, and I read a bunch of what was going on and why I couldn't find the film.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to tweet this guy and see what happens. You know, I didn't think you get responded back because we've tweeted like The Rock like 50 times.
Well, he's slightly busier than I am.
But it was so cool that you agreed to do it in such short notice, quick turnaround, and that you actually gave us a copy to watch the film, which was awesome. And
Oh my God, it was amazing.
it was so great. It's right up our alley. It's something that brings us back to being a child,
Right.
and something. And for me, like I actually grew up to be like almost like a history nerd because sometimes I watch the History Channel on just about anything, but nothing makes me nerd out even more than like the history of something else that I love,
Yeah.
like comic books, movies, toys. I think when we talked earlier, I had mentioned the Superman Lives documentary,
Right.
and how much I thought it was so fascinating of a movie that didn't even get made. And I was not aware of the story that you guys told about who created the He-Man toy line.
Yeah.
So originally I thought it was good. We were gonna talk about the movie, but after I watched the documentary, I was like, I don't want to talk about the movie anymore. I want to talk about your documentary without spoiling it.
Yeah, no, it's such a crazy story, and again, it went kind of back to that book that my buddy Roger Lay gave me, and once I read it, I was like, this is too good not to tell, you know. So there's so many. So I knew that we were going to, in the course of the interviews, get into a little bit of that territory. And for those of those of you listening, it's if you're not aware, there's a bit of controversy over who actually created the original concept for He-Man and Masters of the Universe. And so I knew we were going to delve into that a little bit in the interviews, but there was so much other interesting, fascinating, crazy stuff that ends up happening over the course of the toy line that it just was a gold mine, you know?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
especially what's this? What you were PJ? You were going to mention Lou Scheimer.
Oh,
Yeah.
Scheimer.
Oh my God! Every time that
Isn't
guy
he
came on
great?
screen, I was like, I want more of this guy. I was
I
sitting there like,
know.
by the end of the documentary, I was like, God damn it! I wish there was some like way in this universe to make this into a 10-episode Netflix. You know,
I know.
You know what I mean? Like
No.
it like that murderer show, whatever that was on the Making of a Murder.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you know, who created He-Man? I could have watched this thing for hours because these guys are riveting.
Especially just
they're
one whole episode with just Lou Scheimer.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
exactly. No, they're fascinating. They're fascinating characters, and that's the thing about this that I really wanted to make sure that, you know, it came across for people is that people can see this movie whether they have any idea what He-Man or Masters of the Universe is at all. If you are a human being who is remotely interested in interesting people and interesting stories, this is it. And the guys in it are just such characters. They're so fascinating. You know, we the whole time Roger and I were making this, we were envisioning a whole animated series with just Roger Sweet called The Sweet Life. You know,
Called The
following
Sweet Life.
The Sweet Life, just following him on his day-to-day sort of deal, and obviously Lou Scheimer is just hilarious, and yeah, I mean, there's so many great people in this thing that it's worth watching for just the characters alone.
So for the listeners who don't know, and I didn't know either, Lou Scheimer was the head of Filmation, the animation company.
Yeah, he was a real mensch, a real revolutionary guy, and he was behind everything from Fat Albert to not the real Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters that aren't the real Ghostbusters.
With the gorilla?
Yes, and
God.
and a whole bunch of other stuff, and most notably, the He-Man cartoon, and everybody. He's passed at this point. He died shortly after we interviewed him, and
wow.
in the doc you can see that he's a little shaky. It's because he had Parkinson's. But everybody in the world loved Lou, and he was so lovely to us, and we were just surprised how
Honest.
and animated and honest and cantankerous he was. Just refreshingly. And I pulled his daughter aside, who was also interviewed in the film, and she was there the whole time. And I didn't know how much of his illness was affecting him, and I don't know what medication he was on and all this stuff. And I just said to Erica, his daughter, I said, if there's any of the stuff that you think we shouldn't be using, just say something. She was like, no, this is Dad. This is what he does. This is totally Dad. I was like, yeah, all right. All right. No problem. So, yeah, that was just him. He was
Raw.
Yeah, just a real honest guy,
What's so great is that he was all about making good stories for kids and
Yes.
good messaging stories. And the first thing he says is calling the guys at Mattel a bunch of fucking pricks.
Yeah, no, exactly. Everybody was in this thing at different points for different reasons, and Lou was, he wore his heart on his chest, and he definitely was in it as an advocate for the kids, and which is especially ironic considering how much shit the show ended up getting, as if it were dangerous for kids and satanic and all this sort of stuff. They couldn't have had a better advocate in Lou. And yeah, he was sort of right to be suspicious of the what the guys at Mattel were after and up to, because they were coming at it from a very different perspective.
It's very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like thank you, George Lucas.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Right.
Ruined it for everybody.
Was there is there anything that you had to cut, like a story that was just a fascinating story that might have not had to do with He-Man, that you had to cut, but it was just so good that stuck out to you?
We cut a couple different chunks. The big chunk that we sort of lost, that some people are going to be a little pissed about, was the She-Ra avenue.
Right.
So there was a really interesting story from a writer named Barbara Hambly that was part of the She-Ra chunk, where she said that she wrote a sort of a sword and sorcery fantasy fiction novel with a female lead who was named Shira, and I think it was spelled like Shira or something like that. And she ended up getting bought out by Mattel for so much money that she ended up either making a down payment or buying a whole house. And she told this great story where this guy met her in a parking lot, under cover of midnight with a trench coat and a manila envelope, and sort of slid this
Deep
envelope
throat.
to her. Yeah, it was very cloak and dagger sort of thing. And she realized, that she wasn't worried about, that the Mattel wasn't worried about her suing them. Mattel was worried about somebody buying her book and them coming around, and so it was just so convoluted and so legal schmeagle and all this stuff. It was a really interesting story for this woman who had no connection to anything other than sort of the general topic and having a name that sort of sounded like it, and she ended up just with a wad of cash in her lap just because, and she was just like, what the hell just happened, So that was a pretty great story. But it was tough to lose the She-Ra stuff, just because it was such a big part of the overall story, but we had
stick with He-Man.
Yeah, it was mainly, if it didn't fit into certain categories, we lost it. So if even great trivia bits that I knew super fans were going to be interested in, if it didn't fit into we had 3 or 4 different categories that we were dealing with. If it didn't fit into that, we had to lose it, because it just ended up being a speed bump, you know. So and She-Ra was one of those things. She-Ra basically, the only thing She-Ra kind of added to the story was girls got involved, and it was like, well, that's not a big enough sort of deal to make a whole little detour for, you know.
Right.
What was there a head person that came up with She-Ra?
I don't think there was one particular person. Just like, I mean, as you've seen in the story, there is never one particular person. But it was just sort of like, you know, we're already doing Barbie. It looks like girls are playing with this. How can we capitalize?
My sister had She-Ra. Like, she was so psyched.
Mine too.
Because I had He-Man, and man, she fucking loved She-Ra. Like, she had everything She-Ra. She had the mask. I even had there's an old Polaroid of her in the She-Ra mask, and it was like so cool for her to actually get something that was in like the same universe as some boys' toys.
Yeah.
And she fucking loved that thing. And then, like, I think He-Man came first for the cartoon, like as far as like the syndication goes, or when it was airing on TV, and then She was right after. So like both of us would watch a full hour of He-Man, basically.
I did the same thing. Yeah, because you got introduced to her through the Secret of the Sword, the crossover movie that went to theaters. And so once I saw that, I was like, oh, I know these characters now. I'll continue to watch, the shows. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching She-Ra too, like not thinking it was a big deal. And it wasn't. It was like, oh, it's a girl show. It's like, no, it kind of originates from He-Man, so it was still kind of cool to watch.
Yeah, I mean, those shows were, they were action packed, and they had, good versus evil, and they always had like some sort of morality or some sort of moral story that, like, it was almost like watching an animated Full House episode or something like that.
Totally.
But with action figures. So it was, it was cool. I mean, it was cool back then to watch it. There wasn't really a whole lot of things out there like that. Yeah.
It was the first thing, yeah.
It was 87 was the cartoon, or 86? No, 86 or 85 was the cartoon.
I want to say that it started more like in. I should know this by now, but I'm bad with.
I thought it was like 80. I thought it was like 83.
Yeah, it was early because it was like in the second year of the toy line they started talking about doing the show. So
because it preceded. This was my first like major love of a toy line. Like I had other things. Like I remember I had the Mork and Mindy toy, the Mork toy where you could pull the string. I had that, but nothing like a toy line. Oh, well, Star Wars, of course. But I wasn't huge into Star Wars growing up. I still had the Falcon and everything. But I remember the first major love of a toy line was He-Man for me. Yeah. And then after that was Transformers.
Yeah. Yep. It was a good time to be a kid.
It was Star Wars for me, but I actually had the whole entire line of Clash of the Titans. Like
wow.
Yeah, you were the one. I had the entire line. I loved it. I love that movie so much. I still do, and I still own it. But I remember I didn't know too much about Mattel's background until I kind of watched something about Mattel recently, and they were having all sorts of problems after they passed on Star Wars. So they were spending all that money on buying rights, right, to things.
Yeah.
Like they were, Oh, you explained that in the documentary pretty well. But it was funny. They were naming off the rights of some of the things that they got, and I was like, oh shit, I had all those things. Like,
right.
But He-Man I never bought. I loved it. I loved the look of it. Maybe it was past my generation. I don't know. Maybe it was not my generation. I don't know. I'm a little bit older, but I watched. I loved the cartoon. I had friends that had the toys. I was always playing with them. And there was G.I. Joe and Transformers. There was all sorts of things out there that.
Which toy was your favorite? Which He-Man line was your favorite? Like, which was it? He-Man himself? Was it the Battle Damage He-Man or the regular He-Man? If it was He-Man,
I always, as far as like the main characters and then their sort of offshoots, I always preferred the original. I never understood like when I would go to the store and see Batman wearing like Arctic camo. I was like, what the hell is this? I don't remember.
Right.
We've talked heavily about that. You've seen other toys. Yeah, like we mentioned on a previous podcast that Superman like came with the plane or like,
Right.
Or he would fire rockets, and I'm like, why the fuck would Superman fire rockets?
Yeah,
he can
never,
punch harder.
never got that stuff. So I always liked the original He-Man and the original Skeletor. Hordak, I've always really liked off of the he kind of came from the She-Ra show, just because I thought that he just looked so cool. He was just such a sort of a skull, but sort of not, and red eyes, sort of, and
He had an interesting look.
Yeah, I thought he was pretty evil looking for a kid's toy, and I really enjoyed that. And then I think the first one I ever got was Manny Faces, and that was sort of fun. And then I really enjoyed the Fright Zone play set where you could put your hand into the sort of snake hand puppet, and you could grab figures and bring them back into the deal. So yeah, I didn't have a whole lot because my parents weren't sort of extravagant. I didn't have the big play sets. I didn't have Castle Grayskull or anything. But
I had Grayskull.
But
I was that kid. You would have came over to my house.
Oh yeah, I would have been very. You would have had the sugar cereal and everything, and I would have just told my mom how much cooler your parents were. Yeah.
You have the museum house. You can't touch shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
My favorite was Ram Man and the original He-Man and Battle Cat.
Yeah.
Because you could actually I remember his legs. Remember they were green, and you could push him down, and all it had was like a simple button to make him actually ram, like in the cartoon too. But I would do it so much, even if I wasn't acting out a scene, I would still press the button just to make noise. I guess all kids are fidgety and shit. And the green was completely worn off by the time, I was done with that toy. His legs were no longer green. You could see the plastic underneath.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting one because he's, with very little exception, he's the only one that doesn't fit the body mold of 99% of the other figures.
Yeah, he was more
they're all from.
He's actually shaped like a piece of toast.
Yeah, he's a completely yes. He's like a doorstop, but he's the only real one, except for Orko, which came from the animated show, that just his body isn't that of a muscular guy with a head on it. He's a totally different sort of thing. So he's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I
was gonna say the 30-year anniversary of the movie was literally just a couple days ago, and which that's so weird how all this kind of came together. But did they make up? I'm not too familiar with the characters, but did they make up characters for the movie? And I'm not talking about the black stormtrooper guys, but
they made up stuff. They made up Gwildor, and there was a handful.
The lizard guy that Skeletor killed.
Karg? Is it Karg
and
or something? Krag or
right,
Karg?
and Blade.
Blade was new.
Yeah, they made up several different ones. I mean, they needed
Julie and Kevin were made up.
Right, Julie. You didn't have those action figures? Those are my favorite action figures.
I think you had to get 5 He-Mans to mail in the UPC to get Kevin.
Right, yeah.
I want Kevin. He sucks.
No. But yeah, Wildor was sort of like an Orko stand-in, and they
budgetary.
Budgetary. Yeah, they couldn't have a flying thing around them. That would have been too much money. But yeah, they did make up a couple different characters specifically.
I was so disappointed when I went to go see this because I think I had stopped playing with the toys around this time frame that the movie came out. And I remember Orko wasn't in the movie. I was so pissed that he wasn't.
Yeah,
and then the next thing I was pissed about was the fact that Tila didn't match her cartoon or toy figure.
Yeah,
her outfit.
Or the Man at Arms didn't either.
Or He-Man.
For Tila,
none
my hormones were kicking in, so I was kind of pissed about that. Tila's outfit didn't match.
I just find it funny that nobody comments on He-Man's outfit at all. Not once when he's on Earth. Yeah. I'm like, she just Courtney Cox just runs into him in the alleyway and then just hugs him, and I'm like, dude, he's sweaty or baby oil all over him. It's gross.
Yeah.
It's
not
terrible.
Somebody you want to run into in an alleyway. Yeah.
Well, so what'd you think? What'd you think of the movie when you saw it first?
Yeah.
Well, I came to it a little late. I did not see it in the theaters, and I was kind of moving past. I was at the very tail end of me being sort of into He-Man, and so I ended up seeing it on VHS maybe a year or two after it came out. I want to say, or maybe a year. I don't know. And I was, whether it was my age or whether it was the movie or whatever, I wasn't
Girls.
that girls. I wasn't that I wasn't that into it. And it's it's hard for me to say because I made the documentary and I know Gary Goddard and I really like Frank Langella's performance, and
Yes.
I just met Meg Foster and she's like so nice and all this stuff there, and the designs, Bill Stout's designs. Bill Stout is like the coolest guy alive, and he's such a great artist. And like, there's so many great elements in the movie. But for me, as a kid, not knowing anybody, not knowing anything, and being a real fan of kind of the way that the original cartoon and toys looked, I wasn't a huge fan. There are definitely great things about it, and the more I watch it, I do appreciate more and more of certain elements in it. But immediately when it came out, it was not like a Star Wars for me, where I was like, "This is the best thing on earth."
Right. Right. I was just really we were talking about this off air, but we were just really disappointed that he literally used that sword maybe a couple of times. Like, it was all like he was shooting everybody with lasers. And I was like,
Yeah.
is this G.I. Joe or is this He-Man? Like, what is this?
Right. And then the thing is, the original, and then, again, this is nothing to take away from the work that Mobius and Bill Stout did, but like the original design of that sword was so iconic and so unique.
Yes.
And then to change it in the movie, it was kind of like,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and they decided not to give him a shield, and he actually could have used the shield every scene that he was in. So he got shot at.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, when you see either our little extended clip that we have online, or when you eventually see the movie, you see that everybody was working under extreme.
Well, there's
constraints
another
and pressure,
there's another documentary on Netflix, or I'm not sure. It's still on Netflix, I think, BJ, right? You just saw it
Yes.
the other day.
Just about Canon Films.
It's about it's about
Oh,
Canon
the
films.
Canon, yeah, the Something Boys,
Well, there's two of them. There's
There's one called the Something Boys, the Something Boys. I can't remember.
Go-Go Boys.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but yeah, the Canon guys were just, especially at that point in history. I mean, that they were dying. So it's understandable that the movie isn't as great as maybe some people wanted it to be.
I think it really, even at that age, it really threw me off that it's called Masters of the Universe, and they spend 90% of the movie on Earth.
Right.
Look, they're the masters of a different universe. Okay.
So let's go. Yeah, let's stay in theirs.
Yeah.
They were probably using the Back to the Future backlot. I mean, they even got Strickland to be in it too. They're just like,
yeah, exactly. He was just hanging out. They just were like, "Hey, you want to be in this?"
Yeah. Now, to understand, are they actually? Did somebody else gain the rights to this, and they're going to do a movie? Like
Sony, right?
I heard it actually has a date. It actually has a date now too.
Yeah, it's been sort of passed around. I think at this point, Sony has the rights to the property. At one point, I think what's his name? McGee? Is that his name? The guy who did the.
Oh no!
You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, I think he was attached at one point. I don't know. Scripts of, it could have changed hands again, because I think several scripts have been written, several directors have been attached, but I do believe that things are kind of moving forward. But I don't really know a whole lot. I just know that every 6 months something pops up where it says Masters of the Universe script has been passed around, and here's a possible poster image, and so at least it's still out there and it's still being talked about. So I do think something will happen at some point.
It looks like David S. Goyer is on board to
Okay.
write it, and it said 2019 release. So I don't know.
Okay.
That means they'd have to start filming like pretty quickly.
Hey, they'll get their movie out before we get ours out.
Right.
Well, that was one of the questions that I was kind of apprehensive to ask you because I know you've said
Oh,
it so many
please.
times on
No,
Facebook.
please. I welcome all questions.
So, I know, like I don't want to be that reporter in the the movie marketing circuit where I ask the same question, like, oh, what was your inspiration for this character, But I would want to do justice for the movie and for our listeners who don't know how long and the struggle that you've gone through to try to get this movie distributed. So if you could talk a little bit about that right now.
Yeah, I mean, we started this a while ago, and we had every intention of getting it out by a certain point, which is why we sort of announced at a certain point that we were going to have it out by a certain date, and we weren't being disingenuous. We honestly thought it was going to happen, and a variety of different stumbling blocks just kept coming up and continue to come up. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it's just me and my partner, or at least it was at a certain point. It was just the two of us, and we did, most of the work ourselves. With like I would toss the artwork to my buddy and all this stuff, and then at a certain point, we did involve Mike Nichols, who did some editing stuff and post production, and really made the film presentable. And so at a certain point, we got more help, but a lot of mistakes were made along the way because we'd never really done this kind of thing before, and also we're dealing with Mattel, and we're not dealing personally with, but we're dealing with the entity of Mattel and their property. And so yeah, it's like, well, how is this clip going to clear? Are we allowed to use this? Well, if we go and we find this clip on the internet, we're going to have to pay this schmo $300 for this. Okay, but and at a certain point, Roger Lay, he goes off and he starts producing his own movies, and he's working for Gary Goddard now, and he's designing amusement parks and all this stuff, and I'm working. Yeah, so at a certain point, the thing just sort of, just kind of stumbled along, and we just kept encountering problems, and we were so busy that we just would, when we had a chance, we would try to tick these problems
Right.
out of the way, and it just took forever. And also there's been some internal struggle. It was Roger and I from the beginning, and we involved Mike Nichols, who was a really great editor and post-production guy, and who's one of the producers now. But there was some friction along the way as far as when you don't have anything in writing, and it's two good friends and an extra person, and who did what and who gets what and all of this sort of stuff, it becomes like, fuck you guys, I'm going home, and then we don't see each other for 6 months, and now it becomes like, hey guys, we have a movie here, can we try to like bury the hatch and try to figure out?
It sounds like someone can do a documentary on the getting the documentary done.
You would not be the first person to suggest that, and I wished we would have had a behind the scenes of not only our internal battles, but like all the shit that we had to deal with Roger's suite, and
I bet.
just
God.
so much behind the scenes gobbledygook. But yeah, I mean, the making of this thing has been a strange reflection of the movie itself.
So where does it sit now? I mean,
we are
Okay.
perilously close. We are on the precipice of having it out, and that means, and we've been there for a while. We've had a final cut essentially for several years. The problem is we have to, just because something is essentially locked, we have to go, well, we can replace that photo of Menahem Golem with another photo of Menahem Golem, and we can pay $50 versus $350. So
Gotcha.
we get it locked to a certain point, but we're still sort of exchanging certain things. We've had offers from major distributors already, technically we could sign a deal tomorrow with one of the major places that has put out all of the documentaries that you've enjoyed. We are just I wouldn't say biding our time. We are just getting all of the ducks in the
Right.
row
Yeah.
because we have been in this position several times before, and it's been the proverbial a pie explosion in the face, and so we don't want to do it again. We are closer than we've ever been. The movie is done. It's not
Yeah.
a problem of, I mean, you've seen it, so
Yeah.
it's done. It's done. People want to see it. Distributors want to buy it. There's just a lot of legal stuff to get in order. Yeah. So
I mean, it's wonderful. I really hope that it comes out. I really hope that, like, at San Diego Comic-Con, they can go into a theater and watch it. And then I hope it gets on Netflix. I mean, this is right up. I mean, this has probably been compared many, many times. I'm sure someone's told you, because as soon as I finished it, I was like, oh my God, this is like King of Kong, only better, because you had multiple people in it. It wasn't just like two guys. It was like multiple stories going on.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
I really enjoyed that.
That's a very flattering comparison. I mean, we definitely knew those parallels going in. That movie was definitely one of our favorites, and definitely one that we were thinking about. But yeah, I think that's an apt comparison. Now, I wouldn't compare ours in quality to theirs, because theirs is just so very good. But I would say that just the feel of, even if you don't know anything about video games, you're going to be fascinated by Steve Wiebe and the guy with the with the taco sauce. So it's one of those things, totally. So I do think that not only Masters fans out there, but just people who just like documentaries and fun stories are gonna dig it. So yeah, it's we are so very close, and we appreciate the patience of everybody. It's just I've tried to explain on social media, when people start giving us grief, you have no idea, one, what it's like to do this, two, what it's like to do it with nobody, and three, the kinds of hurdles that we've personally had to go through in order to get it to this point. So
Corey, have you, because this is just fascinating to me, have you documented all this stuff? I mean, have you thought about, like, putting out some sort of, like, I mean, obviously you didn't do the documentary, but I mean, have you wrote stuff down that you can, like, put in a book form, like a companion piece of the movie? Because this shit's riveting to me. Like, I love the movie in and of itself, but there's a whole, like, story of, like, the shit you had to go through just to get the movie out is still pretty fascinating too.
Well, I mean, if that ends up being a thing, I guess that is an interesting idea. I've never really considered it. I haven't written anything down, but I can certainly remember everything. Yeah, and I mean, I can't imagine somebody would want to hear about it, but if they did, it might be an interesting thing to jot down. I've also considered turning the full version of the movie into a podcast series, which I think would be interesting.
Shit.
Because you would get a more expansive sort of view of it, and you would also sort of get more of the behind the scenes stuff that you are talking about. So I am very much considering doing that as well. So
now
that
that's a good idea. That's a good medium, because you can integrate all that stuff, having to get it made. You can integrate that all within, in the that's a great idea, actually.
Who was your favorite interview that you guys did?
Oh, yeah.
A favorite interview, I would say, it was really cool to get to talk to Lou Scheimer, because one, he was so entertaining and also so nice, but two, because he was just literally a signature that I remember from my childhood. Anytime Filmation came up and you would see his signature, I mean, that was a name that I had known since I was a kid, and to sit in his office and to talk to him, that was a little surreal and a huge thrill. Other than that, perversely, I would say Roger Sweet, because we spent several days with him at his home in Seattle, and also a day in Los Angeles with him, and I I think he is the most fascinating character in the movie, and as much as I wanted to beat my head against the wall and his as well during the interview, I found him very sweet, very fascinating, very bizarre, very frustrating. So all of those things together, I just think Roger Sweet is pretty much interview gold.
Yeah, you can't make him. You can't make him up. You can't
Yeah.
like, kind of like Dwight on The Office. It's like, does someone like that exist? That's
He almost
crazy.
he almost has almost like a story arc in the movie too.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't want to ruin it, but it's he's when you
He takes
first
a
meet
journey.
him. Yeah, when you first meet him, you're like, "What the hell, dude? You're not a nice person." And then you watch the documentary unfold, and by the end of it, and you do the when he reveals what he's been doing, and then you reveal at the end, where everybody's at a certain point in their life. I was like, "Oh my god." I don't want to spoil it, but like it was really interesting. Your whole
and
opinion of him changes.
Yeah, and the thing that we, two things I'll say about that point that you just made. One is, we wanted to be very truthful to our point of view with the way that we portrayed people, and we really very much tried hard not to be manipulative, to try to put anything out of order, to make people feel a certain way that we didn't feel. So, I mean, when you get to that point in that movie and you feel that, it's not us deliberately trying to pull something. It's because we felt that, and we wanted the audience to feel that. So anytime you see somebody being a dick in the movie, it's not like we hate this guy, we want to make him look like a dick. It's because that guy's a dick right now.
That guy's a dick.
Yeah. So I feel that we did a really good job of being very intellectually honest with how people were portrayed. And then the other thing I'll say is, you go into the movie thinking of Roger Sweet in a certain way, and you end up thinking of him in a slightly different way, and that is so true about so many other people in the movie, and it's a good lesson in general. People are very complicated, and we want to put people in these little categories, in these little boxes, and like we say at the end about the good guys and the bad guys sort of idea, it's like it's very complicated. People are very complicated, and you may go in thinking Roger Sweet is this way and Mark Taylor is this way and so forth and so on, but the truth is just far more complicated, and their stories are far more complicated, So it's like, Roger Sweet's got some major issues, but is the guy a bastard? No, I don't think so. He was very kind to us, but I understand why a lot of people want to completely strangle him. You can have both. You can have both, That's what's interesting.
Well, I personally, I know we're both gushing over it because it's right up our alley. It's got something to do with nerd shit. It's toys, and for us, it's behind the scenes stuff, and that hits all the things for me. This is right up there with, for me, it's right up there with like King of Kong and the Superman Lives story and all those documentaries that people think that nobody cares about. No, there's people that care about that, and that's why we're podcasting, because that stuff is so awesome. We've said on the podcast before, you guys basically made an hour and a half movie that would be on like the B side of the special features, where the special features lie, the second disc.
Right.
It's so great. Like everything that you guys like, and then I had like a couple of like aha moments. I won't say anything that ruins the plot, but for me, it was where you had mentioned somebody else making a different toy, and it ended up being the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle line. And I was like, my god! I was like, wait a minute,
that blew me away too.
I was like, wait a minute, and then all of a sudden the dots connected. I was like, oh, that's almost the same body type.
Yeah.
Because the Turtles and He-Man action figures are so like distinguishable because of their size and their bulkiness. It's like the same thing if a doll comes out for that resembles a Barbie, exactly that kind of looks like a Barbie because it's so iconic. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles body and arms they're basically just missing like two other digits. It's the same like muscle type too from He-Man that I can remember.
Yeah.
That was kind of a big light bulb for me too. I was blown away. I was like, and you're complaining about what? Like, you had a good run. You had a good run, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was it was really really cool.
Well, great.
What are you guys going to do for an
wait for other
encore? Can
people
you
to
guys
watch
do
it.
Thundercats?
Yeah.
Pardon me? Oh, can we do Thundercats? I mean, I feel like there might be somebody out there doing it. I don't know, but I don't even. I mean, maybe the story is as interesting. I don't know, but it's certainly.
I'm trying to think of like all the toys that I was playing with that you guys should do.
Oh, I know.
documentaries of.
We can do Silverhawks. We can do Thundercats. We can do Mask. Yes.
Bionic 6. I don't know if you guys know that one.
I don't know Bionic 6.
No.
Bionic 6. It was about this like whole. It was the first time that I ever saw an Asian person in cartoon
Oh, wow.
form that wasn't like an anime, and
Yeah.
because basically this entire family, these two white couple adopts like all these different kids along with they have their one kid, so they adopt like an Asian kid, I think a black boy or girl. And basically they're a big they're 6 people. They get into this like accident and they all get these like bionic parts. Now that I'm saying out loud, it's really stupid. So they
like
become
Bionic
basic
Man.
superheroes. They
Bionic
become
family.
superheroes. And the toys were full on metal with like
Ooh.
see-through body parts of their bionics.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was an awesome toy too. So
I've never. Well, maybe you should make a documentary about that, Vic.
Oh, man.
Well, the fact that both
Let
of
me
you
get
have
the
never
first
seen
one
it.
out first. Yeah.
Yeah,
Corey's like,
the
"No,
fact that
don't do
both of you haven't seen it, I don't think I'm gonna get a lot of traction on a documentary on Bionic.
No. Fellow toy nerds, like, I don't know what that is, man. You're on your own.
Exactly.
Well,
Is there actually one that you might want to like? Have you thought about doing something like as a follow up?
I mean, despite the fact that we made some mistakes which caused us tremendous headaches, my line that I've been telling everybody all along the way is go make a documentary. It's you can do it, and it's so rewarding and so much fun, and it's so great. So I got to sort of eat my words, and I would definitely like to do something else because I love documentaries so much, and I found the experience to be so great, and I've certainly learned a lot from it. The one that I would say, I'm not going to say it because it's like, what the hell? If somebody's going to do it, they're going to do it. I would like to do a documentary about speech and debate teams that's sort of very similar to the ones that we've seen about the kids who do the spelling bees and the people who play Scrabble and that kind of thing. I would like to. I came from a town that had a really good speech and debate team that I was a part of, and it's such a bizarre idea and a pastime and hobby and things that kids do. They wear like suits and they go in a room and it's really strange. And they take it very seriously, and so I think it would be kind of interesting to follow certain teams throughout the year and follow certain kids and kind of expose the, because not a lot of people out there know what actually goes on at a speech and debate tournament, and it's really interesting. So that's the one idea that I've sort of had.
I would caution what you named the movie. Do not call it The Master Debaters.
No. Good idea. Note taken.
Yeah, because it has a double meaning if you didn't know already.
Yes.
or fuck it, call it that.
Yeah.
You might sell some tickets, but it's like a bunch of creepy old men with trench coats.
Yeah, you might have the wrong audience showing up thinking it's something different. you get submitted for the AVN Awards instead of like the Saturn Awards. Well, all right. Well, I don't have anything else because if I said anything else, I'd want to spoil it because there's like so many things I want to talk about, but I can't talk about it because I don't want to spoil the documentary because I really want people to see it.
Well, I wanted to say before we go, maybe, just maybe, if when this does come out, the movie, and everybody's seen it, it would be interesting to revisit it and actually get to spoil the shit out of it, because I want to talk about it so bad, and I can't. So it's
Sure.
like, you know, just
No,
we'll have to
absolutely.
try to
Yeah,
do a follow up with
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, when I will say when, not if, when this thing comes out, I would love to get into the nitty gritty minutia of all the strange turns that we have in the movie. Definitely.
This
if
is
you,
definitely the first time I've actually watched a movie where I danced around spoilers.
Yeah, it's
I
true.
appreciate that.
But
yeah,
if
I mean,
you
it's
do,
not. Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's not like it's not the Sixth Sense or anything, but there are just certain things that I don't want to ruin for people.
Yeah, well,
No,
if you
I
do
liked it so much that every question that I asked you beforehand, I only actually had like four or five things that I wanted to talk about from the movie that I know wasn't going to spoil anything. And then every question that I asked you, like I almost asked you a question inadvertently that would have spoiled like the whole ending of your movie. But it wasn't it wasn't like a dead on question about the ending.
That's what's edited. That's what editing is for. It's all right. You fix
But
it in
like if
post.
somebody listened to the words that were coming out of my mouth, they
Right.
would have been like, "Did that fucker just spoil the ending?"
Yeah.
asshole. Well,
Yeah.
if you do end up coming out with the master debaters, we coin that term. That's we get a
Fair enough.
What is it?
It's
$300
it's on record.
Yeah, okay.
It's on record.
It's either $300 or you have to come back for the PR that you have to
that is
explain that it's
fine.
not that type of a movie.
That is fine. Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you, Corey. We really appreciate having you on, and we love the doc, and we hope that it finally gets released and everybody gets to watch it. Then we get.
Oh, you know what?
spoil the show.
Plug your stuff right now.
Oh yeah. Plug your
plug as much as
website
you
or
want.
anything. Yeah.
Oh, no. If you're perversely interested in me, which you shouldn't be from listening to this, I've got an album out there that was produced by Jeff Emmerich, who engineered the Beatles and produced Elvis Costello and Paul McCartney and
shit.
Wings, and so it's if I am to direct somebody to one thing that I've done that I'm proud of, you can go listen to my album Corey Landis and the Attacks. But other than that, that's all I got. My buddy Roger Lay, I should plug things for him since he's not here.
Yeah.
He's got some movies coming out through Universal, a series of movies called Aliens Ate My Homework, and it'll be a Netflix, I believe, a
Wow.
Netflix original movie, something like that. Should be coming out soon. He's not talking to us because he's actually in the studio working on the score right now with our friend Brandon Moore, who did the music for Toy Masters, and he's doing the music for Aliens Ate My Homework. So they're working on that right now.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, Rogers, he's doing well, so he's out there doing that. So everybody watch for Aliens Ate My Homework, and yeah, that'll be good.
Very cool. All right,
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for
thank
watching
you
the movie.
so much.
And, yeah, appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, that was episode 94 of Chew on This, a Nerds United podcast. I'm BJ.
Vic,
Until next time, folks, chew on that.
later.
Bye-bye.